Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to the NTC podcast. Aaron Washington, your host, is here. Glad to be back with you all on this podcast. I am joined by my co-host Colin here. We're back on the mic NTC team. This evening, we have the opportunity to speak with James Herbert. He is a writer with CBS Sports. He's had a couple of very relevant articles go up over the past few days here, and we're just really excited to have him in the studio here, figuratively speaking, for this podcast. So James, thanks for taking the time. I'm glad to have you here and excited to talk and get a little bit nerdy here with some of this stuff this evening.
I love to get nerdy, so thank you so much for having me.
100%. Quick shout out here, guys. We are sponsored by Bet99 Sportsbook. They're the official betting partner of NTC. So we always like to give them a quick shout out and just refer everybody to their site if you're interested in the betting game. So definitely go ahead and give them a shout out and check them out on their site. If you guys would like to get involved with their content over there, all you have to do is check out Bet99 Sportsbook, and they can get you hooked up on all your bets and all your work over there. So definitely give them a look, and we appreciate them partnering with us on this podcast. So, guys, let's jump right into it. And I guess it's nerd time. It's time to dive in deep into the Horford extension. So, an overview: 2 years, $10 million to retain Horford on the Celtics here. Definitely a well-deserved extension. He's been great for the Celtics in his second stint with them so far. He had a great performance last year, all the way through their finals run. Me and James were actually just talking about this earlier. The fact that he's being retained for what is essentially the mid-level is a great deal.
Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement on that one. He fits like a glove on this team, guys. I mean, when it comes to his three-point shooting, the way he kind of spaces the floor along with those other four players, his basketball IQ, his defensive versatility, they're all just extremely valuable with the Celtics team. So it's a no-brainer to retain him. I mean, his deal for this season was not guaranteed. We all knew that was a no-brainer. I mean, that's going to be picked up. And now he's retained for 2 more years with this Celtics team. So it takes him through the 24-25 season, which is a very, very good thing for the Celtics. So, I mean, we know all about all that. We know that it's a great deal. Colin, walk us through a little bit about the specifics of this. I know there's a trade kicker in here for Horford. And so in the event they want to trade him, which, I can't see that happening, but in case they wanted to, they do have to pay out an extra amount to him in that deal. So explain some of the particulars of a trade kicker for people that might not be aware, just so that we can get an idea of exactly how this extension kind of all fits together.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. And it's so nice to have you on. It's great to have a guest here to get nerdy with. But and I was looking and just before we start talking about the trade kicker, just real quick, the Horford extension does seem like a no-brainer. I mean, like you said, they're basically signing him for the mid-level when he's basically their starter and a huge aspect of their team. He's not a star, but I mean, he's a huge role player in their team. And as he might decline as he continues, I think when you wrote about it, he's going to be 39 when the contract ends. So he might decline as he goes, but what you're really hoping for if you're the Celtics is that Rob Williams gets more minutes and he's healthy, right? And when I was looking up on no trade clause, the cap sheets between the two of them through the 24-25 season, they're both earning combined under $25 million, which is pretty impressive to have both those guys on your team for that. But what I just wanted to break down the trade kicker, because you see these thrown around and you see it in an article and you really have no idea exactly what it is. So I just wanted to break it down real quick and get nerdy about the salary cap stuff as we do here in No Trade Clause. So essentially a trade kicker, it's the amount of money that the signing team is going to pay if the player gets traded. It's only that first trade that's going to happen where that trade kicker is going to come in. It can be anywhere up to 15% of the base compensation remaining on the amount owed on the remaining what's earned throughout the remaining amount of the contract. Essentially, it can be a specific dollar amount. So you could just say it's a $3 million trade kicker, or it could be a certain percentage, or you could literally say 15% of the remaining amount owed. But what can get really interesting with these, and it's somewhat small potatoes when it comes to the Horford contract, because it's only $10 million. I'm assuming I haven't gotten the numbers as far as what his specific trade kicker is. I don't know if you guys know that, but what
I
can
haven't
be
seen that.
interesting is if he does get traded, and I know, you said that it doesn't look like he would get traded, but who knows, next year or in the second year, if they need to dump salary and he's on his last year, he might be included in a trade, right? So then you have to start thinking about, as you guys know, if you're a tax team, you have to start matching salary, and we won't go into the real specifics of that, but essentially you have to match salary when you're trading. And what happens is, even though the team that signed him is paying the trade kicker, you're factoring in the trade kicker on a prorated basis for the receiving team that's getting him. So the money kind of is uneven, as far as if you're sending out a $10 million for a $10 million player, if he's getting a $3 million trade kicker coming back, now it's uneven. And the deal kind of falls apart. You have to figure out a different way to make that happen. So that's where it can kind of factor in and be a little bit different. And then, of course, it starts counting on the team's salary as well for salary cap and tax purposes.
Makes sense. So James, I mean, with all that in mind, obviously you wrote about this, so you know a bit about what's going on here. But what are your initial thoughts, like when you saw the news and just having some time to dwell on it? How do you feel about this extension from the Celtics perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I feel great about it from a Celtics perspective. I think this was incredible for them. I mean, Al Horford was an enormous part of them making the finals last year. This year, he can't miss a three, apparently. His defense is still extremely good. I think he's the sort of guy that even if there's a little bit of drop off in the next couple of years, like he's such a cerebral player anyway, that could be all right. I mean, he still is a guy they switch a lot on the perimeter. They want him to be able to play that way, but if they have to like drop him a little more or something like that, then okay. He's also not the only good player they have in their front court. I think you've seen even this year with Rob Williams out, like they have some depth there. Luke Cornett has played well in a backup role.
Shockingly,
it does make me think like what is going to happen with that Grant Williams potential contract when he hits restricted free agency. I thought they probably would have extended him and they couldn't get that done. And the offer that I heard sounded a little low based on how well he had played last year. But yeah, I mean, for them, I think you're celebrating. And from Horford's perspective, I think he sacrificed potentially because he might be able to get a bit more money in the summer if he would have waited. But it makes perfect sense. Like, when do you sacrifice money? When you're on a team that is like a championship contender and his team is the favorite. They've been by far the best team in the NBA this year. And when you're comfortable with the role you're playing and the people you're around, and like a lot of these guys, he's known since they were rookies because he was with the Celtics before he had left, and he left Boston and didn't have as great of an experience as he was anticipating. And I think he basically flat out said today when he talked about it, he didn't want to do that again. Like, he was comfortable. He loves the organization. He loves the city. I like, he would have zero complaints. He's also made a ton of money in his career. So if we're talking about making 10 million or making 13, 14, like, I don't know, like, it's probably worth it for Al Horford to make that sacrifice in the final, will likely be the final couple of years of his career. And the trade kicker, by the way, makes perfect sense in this situation because he doesn't want to be traded. Like, that's the whole point. Right. So I completely get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like he can, he's probably not one of those players that would get a no trade clause straight up, but this is the next best thing. Trade kicker is a little bit less of an incentive to trade him. So that definitely works out for him. One other point about that trade kicker, if it does come down to it and for whatever reason the money doesn't work and the amounts are uneven, as Colin, you mentioned before, player does have an option to waive that trade kicker. We've seen that in the past. So it's not like it's automatically going to be added to that total off the bat. It's going to be, if that player agrees to it, they're in control in this situation. They can definitely go in and say, hey, I'm okay with giving back 300,000 or $1 million or all of it to make it work. If they do in fact want to be traded, thherey're okay with that. So just a little bit of clarification on that point, but it just goes to show you, even with something like a trade kicker, I mean, you can just go down a rabbit hole forever, when it comes to stuff in the CBA, for sure. But yeah, I'm agreeing with you guys. I mean, this makes sense from both sides. And then, James, you're talking about the fact that he's potentially giving up money in this extension. That's definitely the case. And I think for a guy at his age, you got to think about it. You're at a higher risk of injury. You never know what can happen over a course of the season. I mean, we've seen guys decline very rapidly once you get to be in your mid to late 30s. So for him, I think he's hedging his bets and saying like, hey, there is a possibility that, something could happen this season. I could, like we saw with Gallinari, he had an injury that, was a devastating injury. So he's basically locking himself in, giving himself that security. It makes a lot of sense. If you're that age, you definitely want to protect yourself against injuries that could pop up as you get older. So, 100% makes sense for him and for the team. And I think it's going to pay off in a big way.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is to think about perspective when they made the trade, because everyone in Boston was talking about how, oh, well, not all of it's guaranteed. So they'll be able to just cut him and free up some space and try to pursue some other players. Because at that point, they weren't even contenders. I mean, this was before last year, in the offseason. So they were just thinking, oh, it's a way to clear off Kemba. And then when they get Horford, they can cut him and then clear up cap space. And here we are talking about them extending him for another 2 years guaranteed. I mean, it's a great turnaround, which is awesome for Al Horford too.
Yeah, at that point, Kemba, I think, was owed something like 70 million guaranteed or something like that. And Horford was a bit less than that, provided that they cut him. But I mean, it became pretty clear last year that was not going to be in the cards anymore. And I think that was always like part of the rationale was like, it was not only to save money. Like the idea was you get bigger in the backcourt, you can get more size and versatility in the front court. You bring back a guy who maybe is undervalued at that point, because the Celtics knew what he brought to their team a few years prior. They knew what he brought to the locker room as well. And I think they had a better perspective than just about anybody to like look at what actually happened when he was on the court in Philadelphia and Oklahoma City. And I think for a lot of people, it was just like, well, that Sixers team was kind of funky. And like I didn't like watching them. And like, oh, the Thunder suck. Like, look at their record. So Horford must be washed. I was like, he was never washed. Like, you can go back, even Philly, which, like, granted, he was hurt for part of that year and his numbers do look a little worse. But if you go look and like get real nerdy about it and look at the lineups, like when he is not playing with Embiid, or when he is like just playing with one other big guy rather than two, then like they looked good and they were good on both ends. And it was just really clunky because they were trying to play him and Simmons and Embiid. And then, oh, by the way, some of their other role players weren't like quick on the trigger when they got open shots from three. So it just looked bad, but he didn't perform badly. And he was great in OKC. He just sent him home halfway through the year.
You got PTO.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. He was great. I mean, it just really comes down to fit. I mean, I think honestly that could have been a blessing in disguise as well, because especially in OKC, he got all that time off. His minutes declined in a big way. So I think it extended his career a little bit to the point where, instead of being, playing at a age 36 rate, he's playing at age 34 or something like that, because he didn't have those 2 seasons to where he was putting a bunch of miles and minutes on his body. So I think that also worked out for them as well.
And Boston has like shown him that they care about his body and they care about his longevity. They never play him on back-to-backs. They kept his minutes as low as they reasonably could during the regular season last year. They're up a little bit this year, but it's obvious why. It's because Rob Williams is out. So like the whole plan last year was to raise his minutes in the playoffs, and they did that successfully, and he got through it and like thrived and played some of the best basketball of his entire career, which is wild because he turned 37 in the play or turned 36 in the playoffs last year. And now he's on track to basically do the same thing again. And I'm sure once the Time Lord gets back, then you'll see Horford's minutes drop a little bit and it'll get back to looking a little more like it did last year. But it's only like a 2-minute bump or something per game this season, when his role changed like kind of significantly, right? Like he is often like doing the sort of stuff that Rob had to do last year when he's on the floor without him.
Yeah. And James, I saw that you wrote this too, which is really interesting. Even though his minutes are up, his usage rate is a career low, but then his true shooting percentage is a career high, right? So his efficiency is there, which is excellent. I mean, it has to be the perfect situation for him at this age. And that's exactly what you want from him, right? And his minutes are up because of what's, the depth and Rob Williams being out. But that's what you have to want from him right now, right?
Yeah. No, to watch him play in their system, like I think you can look at the numbers and you can be like, well, he's just a 3-and-D guy. He's an elite defender, and then also he's shooting 48% from three. But it's actually a little more than that, because he's sort of like, he's a connector piece from them. He's a handoff hub. He can like put the ball on the floor if somebody's closing out to him fast, and then make a play after he'd done so. Like, this is a guy who used to be a perennial all-star in the NBA, who is now kind of like adjusted as well as you could ever hope to a reduced usage role, but he's still a really important part of what they do. And he's still a very like skilled player. It's just, when you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and oh, by the way, Malcolm Brogdon is now our sixth man, which is the most luxurious thing in the world. You don't need to play through Al Horford. You don't need to post him up a bunch of times. Like, you can still do that if he gets a switch or like whatever it is. But I mean, primarily he's going to try to get those guys open looks, whether it means using his skills as a passer, as a screener, or just his gravity out there. Because now, I mean, like I said, like his shooting is insane. Like that has been a sort of mid to late career, like, I don't want to call it like a radical transformation, but because he's been pretty good at it for a while and he's always like a good mid-range shooter, but like it has absolutely lengthened his career. The fact that it is now a consistent, reliable thing from beyond the arc for him.
Yeah,
definitely. No, and you guys mentioned Rob Williams like 1,000 times. So I think it's just so important to recognize that the signing of Al Horford allows them to have that safety net in the event that Rob Williams is out. And we've seen that time and time again. I mean, he's been very injury prone, unfortunately, but with a guy like Al Horford to step in for him, there hasn't been any drop off. That's why they have the best record in the league, best record in the East, and they continue to just chug along like nothing has changed. So that's definitely luxury for them. But definitely want to get to our second topic here while we have you, James. This is something else that you also contributed to on CBS. And these were a few quarter mark grades around the league. Now, you contributed to, I believe it's the Central Division, but we did want to cover a couple other teams that your colleagues graded. So I don't know if you want to start the firing squad here and, take some
just
shots.
Rip them, whatever it is. Yeah.
Just go for it. I mean, this is your time to shine, man. So we did want to discuss the Nets grade first of all, because this is a team that has been very controversial over the years. They've had a very up and down past couple of years, and the potential is there, but obviously it just hasn't all come together because they can't seem to kind of stay on the court together, which is very unfortunate. But on the website here, they were given the grade of C, and they definitely had some improvements over the past few games. They're in the midst of a homestand, a very lengthy homestand, and they've gotten some, pretty quality wins there at home so far. Ben Simmons has been resurgent here in the past few games until obviously he got hurt not too long ago. KD is playing some of his best ball of his career, which is very, very positive to see, especially after an Achilles injury. I mean, that's just phenomenal for them. Kyrie's back in the mix. And I think it's been underrated a little bit of how these offseason signings have panned out. Royce O'Neal in particular has been great. I've loved his impact on this team just as another connector as far as defensively, his floor spacing, his IQ. He had a game winner not too long ago against the Blazers. So I think their ancillary pieces have fit in very well on this team. So, I mean, me personally, I can understand that grade. Maybe I'll go a little bit lower, C-, but they have turned things around after a horrendous start where it looked like they were just going to absolutely just combust and, not go anywhere. So, I mean, they still could. It's the Nets, right? But as of now, it looks like they're turning a corner. James, I want to hand it over to you, man. How do you feel about that grade? Do you disagree? Like, where are you with that as far as how they've done so far?
So I think they're maybe the hardest team to grade in the NBA because what are you grading them in relation to? If you're grading them as a championship contender, then like the C is fine. Maybe the C is way too generous. If you're grading them based on like the actual players they've had available at certain times and all the crap that they've been dealing with throughout the season, then you're grading on a curve. And you could argue that like, well, maybe you could be more generous. Maybe you could say they're a C+ or a B- or something based on the way things were trending before Simmons had this knee thing pop up again. Like I think you have recently seen a lot more glimpses of what the Nets can be. I think overall their defense being in the middle of the pack is like totally fine and like pretty honestly impressive based on a lot of the stuff that they've had to deal with. You would want the offense to be higher, but it's like we have seen the offense look great. We have also seen it look rough. I think what the Nets are hanging on to is the idea that they can get Simmons back and he'll look just like he did before this knee issue, and that they can surround him with all this shooting and all this talent and all this other playmaking, and they're going to rocket right back up to where they were, the beginning of last year and the year before that, when they were this like elite, at times unstoppable offensive team that was also like good enough defensively to make it work. And like that was always sort of the formula. I think to me, there are some concerns beyond that. Just the rebounding concerns of the big, they wanted Simmons to fix that. That hasn't quite happened. And then just finding the right sort of lineup combinations that they can trust that bring enough defense and size and also spacing. But they're still trying to work all that out. Like they're not, it was never just one thing with them. At the beginning of the year, it was not just they're working Simmons back and he looks hesitant and all of that. It was like Joe Harris and Seth Curry had also missed a long time, for Harris virtually another entire season as well. And they're either not available or they're not quite comfortable yet. And these guys need to develop chemistry with the new teammates that are there. And at the same time, it's like, well, Simmons is one kind of player when he's the only big guy. He's another type of player when he's out there with Claxton, who occupies a lot of the same areas on the court, especially in the half court. So they're trying to work on, I think, Simmons's fit with and without Claxton. They're trying to figure out what the closing lineup is and who should play with whom and all of that. They're bringing back TJ Warren now. That's really interesting. That's a guy who could like change their team in a pretty big way. Mm-hmm. I think I am very, very curious about how that works, and my expectations are not super high because I haven't seen him in so long, but I'm curious. This team always has this tantalizing ceiling. They have absolutely not hit it so far, but they've shown you just enough that we can talk about it without sounding completely ridiculous, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is why I want to bring up the Nets, and you hit it, the nail on the head is, what are you grading on? Are you grading on expectations preseason? Are you grading? And even at that point, what were your expectations? Because, so many people were thinking, look, they're bringing the band back together. So somehow, for some reason, they should be, top three or probably a top three team in the East. A lot of people were saying, or top four team in the East. So if you're thinking that and you're thinking contender, then a C is probably, too generous for, being 12 and 11 and being the 8 seed. Right. But going through what they're going through and not having the players that they've had, then you start thinking, okay, first of all, KD is playing absolutely out of his mind,
he's been unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It's just he just said, okay, forget it. I don't care about anything going on. I'm just going to take over and just be the best player in the world again. But it's just interesting because then the question remains, how much of it is, just simple injuries like the Ben Simmons things, and how much of it is just the team, the coach, when they already had their coach fired, right? And it seems to be improving since then. But those are the things that are interesting. It's what are the bases for the grade? And C is probably just the easy way to say, yeah, they're averaging 12 and 11. But if you thought that, but they were supposed to be there with the Celtics and the Bucks, then certainly they should be a D, right? But with everything that they've gone through, maybe not. So that's why they're an interesting one that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. So the second half of the season, 2 years ago, when Nash's first season, basically the first year of this whole thing, where they'd made the Harden trade, but then down the stretch of the season, it was somebody was always out, whether it was Kyrie being out, whether it was Kevin Durant being out, or whether it was Harden going out. And they just kind of overcame all of it. They had a lot of really quality role players that were stepping in and doing their job. Their spacing was pretty good. Their switching, they were working on it throughout the year. So it looked really good in the playoffs, and the regular season was okay. It was a lot better in the second half of the season than in the first, but it just felt like they didn't have any continuity, and you were still sort of waiting to see this true juggernaut emerge. The numbers looked really good though. And for a lot of people, they were seen as the favorites going into the playoffs. I thought they were going to win the title that year, but it just seemed like things weren't stable. But if you had told me then that that was the most stable and the most continuity that this team would ever have over the next 2 years, I'd be what the hell are you talking about? Right. But we are still now they cannot keep their best players on the floor for any significant stretch together. There's always something, whether it's an important role player, whether it's this, whether it's that. Yeah, I mean, the fact that like it took so long for us to even mention that Steve Nash parted ways with the team.
Right.
Like Kyrie had a whole anti-Semitism scandal and was gone for the team for
Right.
a while, and is now back, and no one's talking about it. Like there's a lot of just like extra stuff that they've been dealing with that is very rarely just a normal basketball team, and it's looking more normal lately. But like I'm about to go to Barclays and like Simmons is not playing and it's TJ Warren's first game. I have no idea what the hell he's going to look like. They remain like something of a curiosity, which is not what I expected I'd still be saying now.
Yeah,
right.
For
Absolutely.
sure. James, we're at 5:26. Did you want to cover one more team or did you want to try to head out? It's up to you.
I could give some quick thoughts, but I got to get out of here. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Can I give you? Can I ask one question real quick on,
yeah, sure.
on one team? So because you wrote on this one, that's why I want to ask. You gave the Bulls a C-. I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on where you think that they're going to end up going. Do you think that they're going to do a fire sale, or do you think they're going to hold tight and try to build later? I mean, they tried to already. I mean, what do you think they're going to end up doing?
So my buddy Michael Pina just wrote on this exact subject on The Ringer a few days ago. And he was basically saying they're going to be left with no choice but to blow this up. And I get it, but I don't think they're there yet. Like, I think they are so committed to this. They went all in with the Vucevic trade. Their whole plan was to try to compete now. Like, I think they can tell themselves, well, like, I mean, I imagine saw the news the other day, like they're hoping to get Lonzo back relatively soon, like early January, something like that, sometime in January. Like, they can still talk themselves into this team having something of a ceiling. I don't think it's what the team wanted the ceiling to be when they made that trade. I don't think it's what the fans want the ceiling to be. I think unless you have Zach LaVine playing at the level that he was at when he was fully healthy, that is going to kind of just push that ceiling down a little bit more. I have no idea what to think about Lonzo when he does come back. I think it's unfair to put it all on him and say that he has to save the whole thing. But it's been rough. Like they should be better when their three best players or highest paid players have been on the floor. Like Caruso might be like their second best player right now. My God, like he has been crazy good this year. But I mean, DeMar is doing like Herculean stuff all the time. And even LaVine, like I don't want to make it sound like he's been bad. He has been good. Yeah. It's just he is not moving the same way he always did. Things are a little bit harder for him. They can't run the same stuff that they ran for him before when he was fully himself. So it is a struggle. Every win feels really like a struggle, like it's difficult for them. And I just think, unfortunately, because of the path that they've taken to get here, they are incentivized, try to make little moves on the margins and try to get better rather than blowing it up. Like, I think it's really hard to turn this train around. You almost need a new front office to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Colin, I'm glad you highlighted the Bulls. That's where I was going to. I was actually going to ask about them. But
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to jump in and ask that.
No, you're good. I mean, we're the same thought. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely in a good place. It's just that it's kind of been hard to get traction for all the reasons that James you highlighted. Just with LaVine taking a small step back, and just Patrick Williams missed the whole season, and he comes back in. I think he's still trying to find his way, and obviously not having Lonzo Hurts because he was one of their big signings from last offseason. So if you don't have him, I mean, that's what kind of made that whole engine go when they were at the top of the East last season for that little bit of period where it was him and Caruso hassling guards on the perimeter. And now that's kind of lost. And you're trying to fill in the gaps with Dosunmu, which I think he's overextended a little bit at the guard and just trying to kind of fill in the spots. So I'm with you. I think that I think their ceiling is capped pretty hard, but they haven't been the best version of themselves, I think, since probably the halfway point or even earlier last season. So I don't think it's fair to really kind of write them off yet. But we'll end it there. Obviously there's so many more teams we could talk about, but maybe at a later point, maybe we get to the halfway point, we can pick this up and kind of see where people have gone since then. But James, we want to take the opportunity to thank you for jumping on. I hope that, making your way to Barclays Center tonight, there's a good game and the Nets don't pull one of their crazy stunts and turn into a pumpkin again. But thanks for everything. And, best of luck CBS Sports in your work and, keep doing your thing. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd be happy to come on whenever you need me.
Awesome.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, James. See ya. Yeah, we'll go ahead and end this off with a quick shout out to our website, notradeclause.com. Me and Colin, along with a few of our other colleagues here, like to run this site, and we handle everything from cap sheets to draft capital, transaction log, a calendar, whatever you guys are looking for in the NBA. Pretty much in any area of the game, we got it for you. So definitely check out notradeclause.com. I've been hard at work over there, updating it with our recent podcast, double checking our draft picks, our capital over there. New articles are going up almost every week. So definitely give that a look for whatever you're looking for. If you want to see Horford's extension on there, I'm sure that'll be on there pretty soon. Whatever you're looking for, we got it over there at notradeclause.com for sure. Colin, another great episode, man. Thanks for jumping on. Great time as always. Love your insight when it comes to the CBA part of the game. It's very much appreciated. And for all you out there, we're glad to have you. We'll see you on the next installment of NTC coming up here real soon. So until then, take care. We'll see you guys later.
Take care.